Hey folks, in this episode of the Light Art Podcast, I get to sit down with Tiba. He's a photographer that comes to us by way of Brazil, through New York, and now Bali. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Light Art Podcast. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today, we're going to have a deep dive conversation into photography and one man's journey around the world and around photography and through genres and through some mixed or Afro-Brazilian martial arts. We're going to talk about all that in this episode. And here to talk to me about that stuff is Tiba. Tiba, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to share my journey with you. You know, it's going to be great. And yeah, let's go. Thank you for having me.
Yes, LFG. Yes, let's go. so
let's go.
Your journey, I want to start with that part before we even dive into the cool photography stuff. Your journey as a photographer, before you even started traveling and all that, how did it, I always, I like to get the one little sentence, couple of sentences about how it started for you. Was it you getting a camera from a family friend or relative? Did it start for you in school, whether high school or college? Like, where did you figure out that, hey, this photography thing is cool, I want to keep doing it?
Yeah, actually, I like to say, I most people say I picked up the camera the first time. I like to say I started stealing a camera, back in 1993. My uncle used to leave his camera around, and I had no clue what photography was. I was too young, but there was something that I liked about holding the camera, pointing, and shooting, and capture images. So it was in 1993 when I first started picking up a camera. And I would take my uncle's camera and shoot pretty much anything, I was just too curious. But then I learned about falling in love with photography in 1995 when I came across the work of Sebastião Salgado, the Brazilian photographer. I remember seeing some of his pieces back in 1995, and I was like, wow, I have no clue what this is, but I like it. And then I came to know that it was photography.
Wow. And that's where you are now. So that was what you preempted one of my main questions, which was who is one of your main influences, as you sort of develop your own personal style. So Salgado was one. Any others?
Yeah. So Salgado is the one, He was, like I said, I remember in 1995 come across his work, not knowing what photography was. And, when you fall in love with something, and you're like, wow, I have no clue what this is, but I like it. It was like through his images, I was living those moments that he had captured with his camera. And I was like, wow, whatever this is, I like it, And then my curiosity started building up, and I started looking more and more into photography, even though I had no clue what it was, what it was about. I was too young, I was very young back then. But then eventually in moving forward, I think I was able to have a camera in 98, my own camera. I didn't have to steal anyone's camera to capture images.
Yeah.
And then from there, so, my passion and love for photography started building up, more and more as the years went by. Yeah.
Yeah. And now it continues to grow, obviously. And here we are today. Before we dive into photography, the whole, I'm sure you and I could talk for hours and hours about photography. I want to talk about the before and the outside of photography stuff. I said in that little intro there that you're in Bali now, but you got to Bali by way of, you started in Brazil and then New York for a lot of years, and now Bali. Tell us about that journey and why that journey.
Oh man, it's been a long, long journey. So let me explain to you how I got from from Brazil to New York, right? I'm a martial artist. I practice Capoeira, the Afro-Brazilian art form. Mm-hmm. And I started training at a very young age, around the same time when I started picking up a camera in 1993. But I was involved in the art of Capoeira from a very young age, because my family is very much involved. There's like a legacy, right? So I had no choice. That's how I think I had no choice. And then in 1997, I was invited to perform in New York. I was a young, teenager. And when I got to New York after the performance, I called my family back in Brazil and say, hey, I'm staying in New York. I'm not going back. I was supposed to go back, right? So I stayed in New York because one, I started getting some opportunities there, for work. And then with my family, I said, I'm going to stay here. I will figure it out, complete high school and then and see what happens. So I went to high school in New York, and then from there on, it was a great chance for me not only to work on my education but also to work on my passion, which was photography. So I just kept shooting, kept learning, and New York was the perfect place, to learn about art. And then I completed high school there. After that, it was time for me to go to college. And I said, what am I going to go to college? Even though photography was something that I did for the love, I never saw myself like, yeah, I'm going to start shooting because I want to make a living. That was never what I thought about photography. It's an art. So then many of my friends in New York, they were designers, like graphic designers, web designers. So when it came time for me to go to college, I went to school for graphic design and web design, But photography was something I kept working, forever, because for me it was not a job. It was something which I enjoyed doing very much. And then after graduating from college, I worked as a freelancer for about 5 to 6 years. And then I was just tired for working for clients. And I thought about going to school to get like a master's or something. But then I was like, I have to truly do something I love. And photography was what I loved the most, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to focus my time into photography. So I stopped doing design work. And then, I put all my time into photography. And from there on, things just started picking up. I started getting some jobs, and that I got an invite to work in a studio, and that's where my studio journey started. It was basically me like reaching out to people and say, hey, I'm a photographer. I want to work as a photographer. I did anything to be in a studio, like I could be there for free. I don't really care. I could be there just like moving things around. When you're starting, you have to be open, and that's how you're exposed, to some talent people, and you will learn some great experience, and also you will learn some bad experiences, right?
Right.
So that's how I pretty much started my journey. And then, but when I got in New York, I always paid the bill teaching the art of capoeira, which I taught for 17 years in New York. And that's how I was able to go from giving up graphic design to put all my time into photography, because making a living as a photographer at the beginning, it's not easy, right? You really have to kind of have a job aside to pay the bills. So I was very lucky that I had the art of capoeira to help me, with the bills, because New York is not a cheap city.
No, it's the worst. I mean, it's the best. It's one of the best cities. But in terms of, you being able to live like you want to live on whatever salary, it's you got to make a stack over there if you want to live nice, right?
Exactly. I still have my apartment in New York, family, friends. I still have a life there. But I started coming to Bali almost 2 years ago, and being out here allows me to work more on my projects, especially the NFT space, which I put a lot of time into it. It's something which I believe in, something that I'm here for the long run, right? So being out here definitely allows me to work because the cost of living is much, much lower than if I were in New York.
Yeah. What is the cost of living in Bali? Like, for example, rent or mortgage or whatever for a decent sized place? What are you looking at?
All right. So basically, I had to, all right. So you might have to put a cut there. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
The way I like to think is, what I pay for rent in New York, I can live in Bali for 2-3 months, man. Seriously,
Wow.
I'm a simple man. I don't need much. I'm very simple. So what I pay for rent to live by myself in New York, I can live for 3 months in Bali.
Wow. Wow.
that gives you an idea, right? So yeah.
So
And
1 year for the price of, or yeah. And so yeah, basically you could live an entire year for the price of 3 months. Right?
actually, yeah. So what to give you an idea? Okay, I'm gonna talk about numbers here. You could rent a nice place for $10,000, but you can go even cheaper, right? Like $10,000 for the whole year. You
Oh,
know what I'm saying? You could have like a 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom villa all for yourself, but also you can go even cheaper, depending, what are you looking for. So yeah, the cost of living in Bali is very, very low. I mean, when you look at my cost of living out here, right? I don't think I spend more than $1,000 a month because one, I don't party, I don't drink, and I think that's like, when people drink and party, they spend a lot. Myself, I'm all about like, arts, and then
yeah,
training
yeah,
my martial arts, hanging out with friends, so
yeah.
yeah, man, the cost of living here is much, much lower. And that's why I don't want to say that's why I'm here. It's one of the reasons why I'm here, especially now with NFTs. I can put so much time, and people are like, how in the world do you put so much time into NFTs? And that's because I'm based in Bali. I do have a pretty busy outside of the space as well. I run a fitness business. I do a lot besides photography, man, because I love staying busy.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the whole cost of living thing. I know a lot of photographers are going to be interested in
Mhm.
that because just you got to travel to where the photos are. And Bali sounds like a location that I'd want to go hang out in, especially
Yeah.
if Tiba's there. If I looking at like you as in the things that you're working on, like you said, capoeira for 17 years, you're an accomplished photographer, you're in the light art collection. Do you see these worlds merging? Like, is the you that you communicate in your work, is it a mixture of all that? Is it capoeira? Is it, your New Yorkerness? Is it your Brazilianness? Is it all these things sort of mixed together and that comes out through the camera? Or do you segment them into, okay, I'm doing this genre right now, I'm doing this genre next, in that way? What's your process?
I have to say, they very much complement each other, because as a photographer, the mindset is one, right? As a martial artist, the mindset is completely different. So it definitely like balances me, to be my very best self. I mean, like nowadays we spend so much time in front of a computer with the phone on our hands. Then with capoeira, it's very physical. Is when I kind of break away from what I'm doing every single day, and then go out there. I'm able to kind of move and sweat, and then come back and I feel way more creative, right? So in a way, the martial arts and the photography, they kind of balance each other. Also nowadays, I feel like I'm living the life. When I say I'm living the life, I'm doing the things I love, which is like photography, and I'm doing capoeira. I always, I've been doing, there's that saying, right? Actually, I don't even like people used to say, you're not a professional until you're paying the bills, So I don't consider myself, I mean, not that I did not consider myself a professional photographer until like the early 2000s, because that's when I started paying the bills, with my photography. So, before that, I was just in love with photography, which is I'm still in love with photography.
Yeah.
So in a way, I worked doing like fashion. I worked doing portraits in New York, but I was working for clients, right? And now with NFTs, I just feel like that I get to create whatever I want, however I want. So in a way, I'm living the life, photography, capoeira, and they very much balance me along the way, So
Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
very much, complement everything I'm doing.
Who are your influences in the NFT space, crypto NFT space? Do you have anybody that you're like, man, I want to be like that person, or that person's crushing it, I aspire to be in that direction?
To be honest, I get inspiration from everyone in the space, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
never want to be like anyone in the space because I am, myself. I am
That's
unique in
right.
my own ways, So I want to grow the best, the best version of myself. So I don't have anyone out there that I'm like, I want to be like that person, but I get inspiration from the most talented photographer in the space to the photographer who's just starting today. Maybe that's my martial art mindset, because I taught for 17 years, been practicing for almost 30 years now.
Wow.
And then, as a teacher, one thing that I should say, I learned as much from like someone who is walking through those doors today for the first time than I would be learning from someone who's been here for 10, 15 years,
That's
so
right. Yeah.
yeah, I learn from everybody. And I think that's what the beauty of life, right? We have to be open to learn and be inspired by everyone. So definitely everyone in the space, somehow direct or indirect, they inspire me, to show up every day. I don't know if you know this, I've been hosting spaces for some time in the NFT space. So I came just like everyone else, not knowing anything. But then, I came to the conclusion there was not too long. I mean, that was about 7 months ago. I decided to host spaces just for fun. I was like, let me see what this whole space is all about, right? I had no clue I would be a host. So I started hosting spaces. And then I pretty much built a community within the Twitter community, So nowadays I have a Twitter space, by the way, maybe a month and a half ago, I hit 200 spaces.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Jeez,
yeah,
that's a body of work right there.
yeah, and and that's how I built, and then slowly people start kind of connecting with what I was doing, the way I was hosting the spaces. Were like, wow, there's something special here, right? So I am a host in the space. So now I don't plan to get to 300, 1,000. That's not my goal here, and I never had plans to get to 200. I love building community. I love bringing people together, right? So what I'm doing now is, I used to host every single day. Every single day I showed up to host the space. So now what I do is, it's not realistic for me to be doing this every single day. I started bringing more people, to host spaces, like to empower them, because sometimes people just need a little bit of a push to get going, right? So I have other hosts, especially, empowering the female artists in the space, because I don't want them just to sit and follow. I want them to lead the way. So as of now, I have about 3 hosts leading the way. It's pretty wonderful. They're doing such an incredible job, like hosting the space. I also started a Discord, which is for the community. It's called Flare. Yeah, I love bringing people together. I love building, not only for myself, but for the people who are around me.
I love that. You have to invite me on to come host one of your spaces, because that sounds amazing. I'm coming over there.
Let's go. No, please. I would love to have you there. It would be such a pleasure, and that's the goal, right? Like, throughout the whole week, we had different theme topics. What are we doing now? We have one of the hosts. She's a journalist. So every Wednesdays, she interviewing someone in the space. Yeah, nice. So she's doing that. Yeah, so we have such a great team, like people who just like, they're genuine, they're talented, they're just like willing to, go the extra mile for everyone in the space. So I'm very lucky to be connected with those people. And they're the ones who inspire me to show up every day, because imagine if I were just showing up for myself, it would get boring at some point.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about your work,
sure.
And your just sort of your approach to the look that you developed. And I'll have a gallery of your shots in the blog post for this episode,
sure.
on the light.art site. But when I look at your work, I see emotion. I'm looking at it on this other display here. I see emotion. I see contrast. Even I think this is a shot of Carnival. But stereotypically, it's not in color. It's in black and white, high contrast, black and white. Talk to me about that. Your use of lack of color and instead leaning on contrast.
First of all, like a lot of my work, I need to take a few steps back, because when I was working for clients in New York, right, no one wanted my black and white. they're like, I would be like, hey, how about we throw some black and white there? They're like, no, we like colors. I was okay, fine. So for many years, I was just creating color and color and color, but wasn't the kind of work I wanted to create, but they're paying, they have the right to say whatever they want, right?
Right.
So then, I always worked on pieces, that I wanted for myself, which was black and white. I was inspired by Sebastião Salgado's work, the master. And then when NFTs came around, I was like, yes, this is my chance, to be the photographer that I want to be, right? So when it comes to black and white, I also like to say I see the world better in black and white. When I create and those pieces, they become alive in black and white. Wow, I can see a completely different picture, the connection I have with the pieces, right? Yeah. So I love dodging and burning. I love pulling, images out of, making more of them into like a 3D, let's say that. And when it comes to capturing images, I love people. I love talking to people. I love connecting with them. I'm not that kind of photographer who snaps a shot and walks away. I take the time to get to know people, learn about their stories, because it's not me about creating a story for the people who I photograph. It's about me telling their stories in the best possible way that I can, as a photographer.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, if we talked a little bit about NFTs and that world. When you put yourself in the shoes of a collector, and the collector's looking at your work and they're like, okay, I feel like I want to buy this. When they're looking at your work and we're just about to, pull the trigger and make the transaction, what is it that you want them to know about you? Like, what would you want them to, while they're sitting there and they're looking on their screen and they're like, oh, this is amazing, I feel like I want it, and you had the chance to get on their shoulder and talk to them in the ear, what would you want them to hear from you, like when they're about to make that decision to own one of your pieces?
Yeah. So, one, I want them to know that I create, the pieces that I create, I create them with passion and love for photography. I'm not just putting pieces there, whatever, just for people to be like, buy my work. I definitely take the time to work on each piece that I put out there. And I want them to know that, if I capture, let's say, photograph people, I want them to know that I took the time to get to know that person who I photographed. I took the time to experience, or, I worked with dancers for many years as well. I like to say that I took the time not only to create an image, but also to get a person, as an artist, or if anyone who I got to photograph. So for me is, one, I want them to know that, I have the passion and love for photography, and that I took the time to connect with the artist. And also I want them to know that the piece that's out there, it's something that I chose carefully. I'm not just trying to put pieces out there for people to buy. So yeah, those things I want them to know, that I care about the work that I'm putting out there and I create.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, when in some of the interviews I talk to artists, they say something similar, and there's also the sentiment of being able to stay connected to the purchaser, or the piece that you created being the connective tissue between you and the collector. So now you have this relationship that's built because of this piece that you can, and because of the internet, you can communicate, and the artist can, say, hey, thank you for buying my piece, right, to the new owner, and the new owner can say, hey, this thing really spoke to me because of these reasons, which I think makes you a better artist, because this person paid $10,000 for this piece because of these reasons, and now those reasons, which is magic, which in the old world, you wouldn't know that. Someone sees a print on the wall in a gallery and they buy it, the relationship is kind of over at that point. And now it can maintain. Yeah. So that's definitely really cool.
Also I was going to say, also want, collectors to know that I'm here for the long run. I've been here in this space for about a little bit over a year now, and I'm here for the long run. I plan to make this, my thing. My martial art is something I've been doing for 30 years, and I hope to be doing NFTs for the next 30, 50 years. I plan to go nowhere. And also I see NFTs, as you had just said in different words, is the bridge, between artists and collectors and
Yeah.
just people in general.
Yep. No, absolutely. It is. It is. It is the bridge. I think, I mean, there's so much to it because there's the superficiality of NFTs. Like, why are people paying all this money for something digital? And, there's that level of conversation. But then I think the real conversation is like we've just been beating into the ground, is the whole idea of the connective tissue between you, the artist, or the symbiosis even, right? Between the artist and the collector, and that feedback loop that happens in this space that can't happen in many other spaces, which I think is something people overlook, right? Because it's not only the relationship isn't over after the money leaves your wallet and goes, or leaves their wallet and goes into your wallet. The relationship isn't over. It's just beginning at that point. And it's them. Now somebody on the planet that instead of just saying, oh, that's nice, right? And that's it.
Yes.
You're getting somebody literally took money that could have been going to their kids and gave it to you instead because they think your work is worth it, right? And that's got to be validating from an artist's standpoint, from a, informing you on what is working or what is resonating with people, right? Because if people are buying this kind of work versus that, then right? It's a really interesting space. So I don't know what's next for you. Well, what's next on the Tiba schedule of things to do. I got you up early for this interview, so folks, as we record this, it is 6 a.m. in Bali. So I'm seeing the light. I'm seeing the sun come up behind you there in the window.
Yes, definitely, man. The sun's gonna be coming out there. Yeah, it's it's. I had to get up at 4:30 to be here, but it is what it is. I'm happy that we're here. I'm enjoying the conversation. Now, what's next for me, right? So, as I had mentioned. In the community, I'm a community builder, right? So I feel like being in the community is not just about me just putting work out there, right? It's about me onboarding all the people. So I've been hosting spaces for the last 7 months. Up to now, I think I'm up to like 250 spaces. I think that's what it is. But my goal is not to be collecting spaces. My goal is to empower all the people. So I'm onboarding more people, not just to come and speak, but also to lead the way. I have female artists leading the way, stepping up as a host. And all I do is I'm there for them, support them, because sometimes that's what people need, right? Just a little bit of a push to get started in the space. Now, as an artist, I'm taking the time to go back and work on some of the stuff I have done, because the truth is, like most people, when we first come into the space, and I came into the space at a period where there was so little that we did not know, right? And now we know a lot more than we did about a year ago. So I'm taking the time to improve everything I did before, because as I had mentioned, I plan to be here for a long time. I don't want to look back 5 years from now, 10 years from now and say, hey, I should have gone back and fixed, what I had done. For example, I have a whole collection of mountain gorillas, which was on an OpenSea contract. So not too long ago, about maybe 2-3 weeks ago, I went back and reached out to some of my collectors and say, hey, I want to move this collection to a manifold contract. And I did that, right? So I'm just taking the time now to really go back and fix everything that I have done before. I have, a few collections which I plan to drop at some point. So I'm doing some editing on this collection, but I want to experiment, because myself, I also work with videos. So I think it's the time for me to start brainstorming some ideas for videos and bring them into the space. Yeah. So for now, my goal is to empower people in the community, is to experiment and to fix what I have done in the past, because I want a solid foundation moving forward from here on.
Love it. All right, Tiba, we'll leave it right there, man. Thank you. Thank you, for getting up so early to let me, pepper you with questions. And thank you for creating such an amazing body of work. And I'm going to preemptively thank you for inspiring all the people that you're going to inspire through all the things that you're doing, including the Capoeira. So that's what an amazing human. That's amazing stuff that you have going on. So thank you for all that.
Thank you. I would love to have you in one of our spaces. We can talk about it and and see what we can speak about. It would be really great, to have you there. Maybe you can speak about the Lights Collective. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
We're gonna talk about the details, but yeah, I'm always open to have people come through and share what they have been, like yourself. You've been putting these podcasts together, which is, I think it's really, really wonderful. You're showing up for artists, man.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this. So definitely I would love to have you there. Let's work on the details.
All right, it's official. It's recorded now, so we got to make it happen.
It's official.
It's on record, literally, right?